What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WrestleRant, back with another book review here on the channel, our first in a few months. Today to talk about Becky Lynch, The Man, Not Your Average Girl. The last book review we did here on the channel was the Soraya book, Hell in Boots. Great book. Go back and check that out. I did the Audible version for that, so I was able to get through that a lot quicker than a lot of the other books I have physical, versions of. And this is not the book that you'll see in bookstores, the Becky Lynch, Not Your Average Girl book. The story behind this is I actually got an advance copy very early on in 2024, actually, probably even around Christmas time, 2023, before the book came out in bookstores in March of 2024, because I was set to interview Becky Lynch for the book, which I did end up doing for Bleacher Report and here on the channel. You can go back and watch the video of which here on the channel. Becky Lynch was amazing. I really wish I had read the book beforehand. It wasn't that I actively chose not to. I just didn't have a chance to, didn't have the time. I've had more free time lately to kind of go back and read a lot of the books that I have that I've either started, not have even begun yet, that I kind of started, didn't finish. This was one of those books. I read maybe like 80 pages of it up until last summer because I got the book in early 2024. Didn't really start it until like last summer, and I got maybe 60, 80 pages into it. And literally the last 2 weeks alone, since 4th of July up until this past Friday, I read the rest of it. And there are at least 365 pages in this book. I read, what is that, 280? Like 280, or I guess 300 if I was like 60 pages in. 280 to 300 pages in 2 weeks. I was that enamored with this book. Not only because they had the chance to do it and I had more time to read, but because the book was so fucking good. This was one of my favorite wrestling reads in quite some time. And I haven't done a lot of wrestling reading in the last few years. I used to read a lot more wrestling autobiographies years ago when I just had more availability and time to do so and more freedom to do so. But of all the wrestling autobiographies that I've read, this one was honestly among my favorite. And it might be just the recency bias and being a Becky Lynch fan and the fact I just got finished reading it. And a lot, like, it reminds me a lot, and I was thinking this not even after I was done with it, but really just even halfway through. Her writing style is my favorite part of this book. She is very candid. She is very honest. If you are looking for a wrestling book or a wrestling autobiography that does not hold back and that gives you all the behind the scenes stories that you're looking for and stuff like that, honestly, this is the book for you. I wish I had taken notes on this book. Just when I started reading it last year, I wasn't taking notes. When I did the Soraya book, the Audible version of that, I did do notes on that. So I had a lot to discuss as far as what was left out, what she could have elaborated on and whatnot. I'm sure the Audible version of this book is also great. Like I said, I just read it, and I'm sure listening to it is also awesome. I highly encourage buying the physical book and getting the actual book and reading it in her words, and hearing in her words is also great, like I said. But just her writing style really reminds me of Mick Foley and Chris Jericho, both authors I admire greatly for the way they write. They kind of do some asides and funny jokes and callbacks and don't really take themselves too seriously when they write. And she does reference many times in this book that she had a, ongoing journal dating back to when she was a kid. So honestly, a lot of the conversations and experience that she recounts in this book, specifically earlier on, that might be hard to recount decades later, she probably got from, talking to people, talking to family, but also journaling about it at the time, which really comes in handy, and I would recommend for anyone, honestly, whether you intend to write a book or not. But the stuff that she writes about when she first, not even breaks into the business, but her upbringing in Ireland, her family situation, her parents divorcing, her relationship with her parents, and her mom really being supportive but strict and really wanting her to find her path in life that was not wrestling related. She really was not supportive of the wrestling thing. And she hammers home a lot, spoiler alert, including at the end of the book with a great last line, that she is just an average person. She's not like exceptionally talented at any one thing. She's a great professional wrestler now, but she wasn't always a great professional wrestler. She doesn't go through this book saying like, "Oh, I'm the best in the world. Why aren't they noticing me?" She holds herself accountable for a lot of bad matches, a lot of bad promos, a lot of bad moments, and not even just including in the beginning of her career, but also in WWE. Like, she talks very briefly at the end of the title exchange on SmackDown with Charlotte and how that kind of went awry, and that was a terrible segment from late 2021 when they were doing the whole Raw Women's Championship, SmackDown Women's Championship belt exchange. That segment sucked. She talks about that. And I won't give everything away here, but she talks about the finish to the WrestleMania 35 match, because really the entire book builds around the road to WrestleMania 35 and how she said even earlier on in her career she would always love to main event WrestleMania, even though up to that point women had never main evented WrestleMania. She talks about the call up and how she probably wasn't earmarked to be called up, but Bayley had to be held down so she can hold down that division in NXT. She was definitely more main roster ready by the summer of 2015 than Becky was, but they needed like some real change in the women's division in WWE in the middle of 2015. And she talks about how even at that point, and even up until the main event of WrestleMania and coming out of it, she was very insecure about herself as far as where she was going in her career, where she was going in life. And she talks about a lot of life stuff too, including the birth of her daughter a few years ago. But like a lot of her love life stuff is in here, including like maybe not everyone she's ever dated, but that is honestly what I found even more fascinating than the wrestling stuff itself at times. She doesn't name him by name, but a quick Google search can tell you who he is. But she talks about for a while dating a UFC fighter who, I don't know if he's still fighting now, but he was at the time, 10 years ago. How she was just with to be content with, and how she was on the road and she wanted to feel fulfilled in her personal life outside of being on the road and outside of the ring and whatnot. So she started casually seeing a UFC fighter, but they were together for a few years. Like they lived together a few different times in a few different places. He even proposed at one point and she said yes. But then she obviously, even at that point when she said yes, she only said that nervously. She eventually went back on it and they called off the engagement and she broke up with him over text. And she regrets a lot of how she handled that situation in retrospect in the writing of this book, which I admire. She doesn't go about saying like, oh yeah, he was an asshole. Like she does say he wasn't the one for me, but she does hold herself responsible and kind of not even really dragging him along, but like maybe leading him on and saying yes in the first place, even though she didn't mean it. All this other sort of stuff. So again, she doesn't name him by name. It's not even someone I was familiar with when I did Google his, Becky Lynch, UFC fighter, dating history. It's well documented. She was posting pictures of him at the time and articles were writing about it, whatever. She also talks very extensively about starting to date and then eventually marrying Seth Rollins. So for anyone interested in that sort of thing, she gets into that a lot. And how she was apprehensive for a very long time up until they started making it official, the terrible storyline that WWE turned it into on TV that thankfully did not ruin their relationship. It only grew it stronger, made them stronger as a unit. But yeah, she talks about how like even he was seeing someone to the point where she was with that UFC fighter guy and he was a really close friend to her and they were really good friends. Them two, Owens, Zayn, she talks about a lot in the book. Finn Balor, she talks about extensively, which I'll get to in a second. But Rollins even said at one point, like, I'm surprised she even included this. And, it's kind of it's kind of forcing him to be more open about the relationship and stuff that he may have done wrong or may not have done, whatever. Not that he does anything wrong necessarily, but like he said to her earlier on in their speaking to each other that he didn't really feel like he was right for monogamy, like just marrying one person, which was really interesting considering they're married now. And he's also had a history of cheating, at least once. Dating back a decade ago, that incident was very well documented amongst wrestling fans at the time. So, I mean, she doesn't mention that in the book at all. Like, oh, I was skeptical to date him because of his history. Like, she didn't talk about that whatsoever. I don't know if that was a factor or not. Doesn't really matter. Not our personal business. But she does get into a lot of how she fell for Rollins and how they were friends to start. And again, how she was apprehensive to date a coworker and how badly it could end because she was never involved in a relationship that didn't end well. Like, I mean, what relationship really does, I guess. But, like, every relationship she had been in prior to that point did not end well. But on that same note, a lot earlier on in the book, talking about her upbringing and how she got into wrestling, she had a massive crush on Fergal, a.k.a. Finn Balor, a.k.a. Prince Devitt, what have you. And he actually had a hand in training her because I think he's definitely older than she is. I think he might be 44, 43 now, 45. I don't remember. I don't think he's 45. I think she's 38. So he was like several years older than she was. And I don't know at what point they were dating, to be honest with you, where, like, what age she was and what age he was. I mean, that was a little weird looking back on it. I'm not really sure what the ages were, respectively. Not that it really matters in retrospect, but still a little odd. But it was funny reading that because I guess she's talked about this in other interviews where she had actually never confirmed that before up until she wrote this book. A lot of people just assume that, but this was the first time she's actually referenced to having a history with Balor as being in a relationship with him several decades ago. And the funny thing about that was that when they were both in NXT at the same time, like around 2015, right before Becky got called up, when she would talk about him in like video packages and stuff like that, everyone assumed there was something there, like she had a crush on him or something. And it just never really materialized. They did date for a little while before he had to leave for Japan, and then it kind of fizzled out and they broke up, and that was about it. They did remain friends. They obviously work now and even then together in WWE. And she's talked about how they remained friendly and there was never a hint of jealousy on his end. So just to hear that sort of stuff, I thought was really, really interesting. The personal side, and she doesn't get like extremely personal, but personal enough to where it allows her to be vulnerable, and it's very admirable. And again, the way that she writes about it is also amazing. But like I said, as far as like the behind the scenes stuff, that was really interesting to me. Hearing about a lot of storylines that she either was not for or that were going to be the case originally. Like she was supposed to retain the women's championship against Alexa Bliss at TLC 2016. I did not know that. The plan was for her to originally retain because they were supposed to have a match. I think at No Mercy, Becky had some sort of health issue, which I totally forgot about. That was the case. I remember now, but I totally forgot about it until I read it in the book. And they were going to give the belt back to her at the Royal Rumble. Spoiler alert, they did not. She lost the belt to TLC, and her push was pretty much over for like a good year or two until they turned her heel. And she talks all about that and how she was against it and how she thought it was a dumb idea because she thought they were going to cheer her. And their justification for turning her in storyline never made any sense. I was there for her first SmackDown as a heel after SummerSlam in 2018. And I could tell you firsthand, no one wanted to boo her. I mean, they were in Brooklyn and they thought, oh yeah, they're in smart cities. They'll die down. Again, spoiler alert, they did not die down. They remained very much behind Becky Lynch and continued to, root for her and cheer for her in subsequent promo segments and until they kind of had to turn her into a tweener, into a babyface by late 2018. It didn't even last a full few months. But she talks a lot about the Evolution match with Charlotte and how that she was really proud of that match. She was not proud of the Triple Threat TLC match with Charlotte and Ronda at TLC, or Asuka. Ronda got involved. At TLC 2018, that would have been how the match at Mania was kind of not great. She kind of even referenced when they were practicing the match a few days earlier that the original plan, according to Tyson Kidd, who was their producer for the match, or at least someone who had a helping hand in putting it together, that Ronda was supposed to tap out to Becky in the armbar. There was also a spot earlier in the match where she would tease it and then Charlotte would break it up. And Ronda, not even having heard about the finish to even that first near fall, said when she showed up to the building, she was late, but it wasn't her fault. Her driver went to the wrong building, whatever. She said, oh yeah, my mom wouldn't like the fact that I looked vulnerable enough because I would never tap out. And I'm thinking, okay. And I think she did end up tapping out, I believe, right? To Shayna Baszler at SummerSlam a few years ago. Now, granted, that's her friend, a former MMA fighter. But it would make sense. Like, Becky doesn't outright put in the book that Ronda refused to tap out. But that's kind of like what she was hinting at because they did not end up going with that finish. They ended up going with the roll-up finish, which was the correct finish, but the shoulder being off the... It would have been anticlimactic regardless, but it was really the shoulder being off the mat that the referee didn't catch, that Ronda fucked up on, that really messed up the ending of that match. And she acknowledges that the crowd was tired. The match was good, but it wasn't ideal circumstances. So I thought that was really interesting too. She had nothing but praise for Ronda. She talks a lot about Charlotte and how at that point they weren't really close. I mean, they might be closer now because they've since teamed up to Survivor Series. In storyline, they're closer, but like in real life, I doubt. Their relationship is not what it was 10 years ago. I'm sure they're on better terms now than they were when the fucking belt exchange happened. I'll tell you that much. Back in late 2021. But she talks about how they were really close and how when their feud happened, that was when they kind of started to go their separate ways. And Becky had a lot to do with that. She talks about how she regrets a lot of the stuff that she tweeted, a lot of the stuff she was posting on social media. The way she went about it wasn't ideal, she talked about. And how Charlotte really seems to be, and this isn't really much of a secret, she's talked about this herself, other people have said this, she's a very sensitive person. Like, they got back, I think, from one of the matches, and Charlotte was crying. Like, Becky got the belt, I think from the Evolution match, or it was somewhere around then, when Becky, I think it was the Rumble, actually. Becky won the Rumble. Charlotte went backstage and was crying. Very weird, very weird. And then she seems like very protective of her spot, not like she's Charlotte Hogan or anything like that. Like, even when they were putting the match at 35 together, which, again, I'm speaking a lot about it because that was the most recent thing I read, Charlotte was upset that she would come across like the third wheel in the match. And I'm just thinking, well, and even the referee who was putting the match together said, bitch, of course you're the third wheel. It's all about Becky and Ronda. That's where the feud is at, which is true. And the idea, Becky said, was that they wanted to keep Becky and Ronda apart, really, so they could build to another singles match down the road that actually never ended up happening. Now, Ronda, they always knew was leaving after Mania to go start a family, get pregnant, whatever. She did come back, but she came back at honestly probably the worst time. Because going into Mania 38, when they did, how long would that have been after she left? 3 years? She was gone for about 3 years. She won the Rumble, and it fucked up all their plans. Thankfully, they did stick with Becky and Bianca, because Bianca, or the last thing that Becky writes about in this book is winning the title at SummerSlam 2021. She does a quick, follow-up as far as what happened in the year that followed. But the last major thing in this book is about her winning the championship at 21, SummerSlam 21, and turning heel. And she said, even going into it, after the match itself, she told Bianca, I will make this up to you. We will make you a bigger babyface. And Bianca was crying, and she's talked about that before. She doesn't talk about wanting to lose to Shane at Mania and then Vince saying no. I guess she said that in an interview with me or someone else. She didn't say it in the book, which was interesting. But she wanted to lose to Shane at Mania 36, and Vince said no, and she retained instead, and then she gave up the championship anyway because she was pregnant. She found out she was pregnant after Mania. I guess she was technically wrestling at Mania pregnant, but she didn't know. But anyway, yeah, just kind of some craziness. So she did end up, back to the Ronda thing, she did end up losing to Bianca at Mania 38 in a great match. So she did actually, live up to her promise. The match to do when Ronda came back was Ronda and Becky. Because even a year later at 39, when they could have run it back, it didn't even make sense then. The bloom was off the rose at that point. People just didn't really care as much as they once did. It would have been, 4 years later? It just wasn't the same. The match to do when she came back would have been Becky and Ronda. Even if the roles were reversed and Becky was the heel and Ronda was the face. And Ronda was a face when she first came back, but Becky was busy with Bianca. They couldn't deter from that plan. So then Charlotte's plans, she was clearly primed to face Sasha at Mania, because they had teased that a few times. It was clearly supposed to be Charlotte and Sasha at Mania. And then Ronda came back, Sasha got put in a tag team instead with Naomi. And her storyline with Sonya kind of fizzled out, and that didn't really go anywhere either. So, kind of makes sense that Ronda's return really was a last-minute thing. I've heard elsewhere that it was planned months in advance. I think she talked about that in her book. Doesn't really make sense to me as far as the creative plans are concerned, but anyway. A lot of great stuff in this book as far as the creative stuff is concerned, her personal life is concerned, her career is concerned, and just a lot of other great, honestly, things that you can learn from and be inspired by from this novel. So I would strongly recommend picking it up if you haven't already read it. It's been out for well over a year now, so hopefully by this point you have. The Audible version is great. I use Audible stuff to kind of get through stuff quickly. I'm still listening to a Jim Ross book on Audible. I did his first book on Audible. The second book I read, his most recent third book, the most top, famous 50 calls of his career. I got that for free through a trial on Audible, so I'm listening to that right now. I'll review that. That will probably be the next book review. The next physical book I'm reading, which is right behind me, it's called Say Hello to the Bad Guys by Mark Raimondi, friend of mine, great author, great writer. Got a copy of the book from him, so I'm actually in the process of reading that right now. It just came out last month, so check that out. I'll probably review that at some point. Hope to get through that as quickly as I did this. But yeah, the Audible stuff is great. With the Becky one, you'll hear her voice as she narrates it. I would just recommend reading the actual book. Like the Saraya book I enjoyed. I think I enjoyed that more as an Audible than I probably would have reading it. But I don't know. It kind of depends on the person. Becky seems like someone that... The thing with Saraya is that she wrote her book, but she said to Jericho recently in an interview on Talk is Jericho, she had a ghostwriter do it, and then she just had her friend type it up for her. So it really does sound like a book that she just fucking spoke out loud, which to me is why it works better as an Audible book. Reading it probably would have been fine. With Becky, she did do the narration for it, but she is a writer. She's always been a writer. She's always journaled. She hasn't, written other books or anything like that, but she likes to write. So it makes sense. Some people are just better writers than they are, narrators. The narration is probably great. I just read this as she wrote it, and it was very, very good. So again, I couldn't put it down. I read, like I said, 280 to 300 pages in 2 fucking weeks, which tells you, which I never do. I have not done that in probably 10 years, which tells you how great this book was. So check it out now. It's called Becky Lynch, The Man, Not Your Average Girl. And also check out my chat with her from last year right here on the channel, talking all about the book, the heel turn stuff not discussed in the book, and a whole lot more. It was a really fun chat, and I got a chance to meet Becky to actually sign this book. She signed it. Let me pull up the page now. She was at a book signing here in Connecticut soon after the book's release, and she signed it for me. And she recognized me from the interview that we did like a week or two earlier over Zoom promoting the book. So she could not have been more lovely. At any rate, though, thank you so much for checking out this review. I appreciate it. If you are interested in more book reviews here on the channel, check out the description box for the playlist of more book reviews that I've done, including the Soraya book from a few months ago, the Hardcore Holly book last year, the Ronda Rousey book last year. The Hardcore Holly book came out in 2013, but I reviewed it last year is what I mean. I reviewed those books among many other books years ago, so check those out when you get a chance. And like I said, the next book review should be up, hopefully at some point, if I can get through the Jim Ross book soon, and the NWO Say Hello to the Bad Guys book in the near future, hopefully by the end of the summer. So, until next time, guys, have an awesome one. Be sure to like this video, drop a comment, share the video, subscribe to the channel for more daily content, sign up for a channel membership, and get videos like this early, sometimes ad-free, depends on the video. And if I'm around to turn the ads back on when it goes live for everyone else. But you can get videos like this ad-free or rather early access to if you become a member. So consider that perk as well when you sign up for a channel membership here on the WrestleRant channel. Have an awesome one, guys. I'm Graham Juice Matthews. I'll catch your ass down the road.